Well, another draft has come and gone, and as the dust settled, I found myself asking one question I believe we all did, and that's just where exactly does Will Levis's draft slide land among the biggest free falls in NFL draft history? And after looking into it, I think I've come to an interesting conclusion, or maybe just observation, that I'll say for the end of this video. And I want to see if maybe you come to the same one. But quickly, maybe we should go over the criteria of what I considered a free fall. Hello and welcome to Plug Sports. My name is Spencer Christensen, and the criteria was very simple. Any player heavily discussed, mocked, or ranked as a first-round selection anywhere from their final year of their collegiate career. Oh, and the player needs to have completely fallen out of the first round to qualify. And with that said, these are the 10 biggest free falls in NFL draft history.
Number 10/honorable mention, Laremy Tunsil.
Alright, you got me. I wanted this to be a top 10 list. This one does not fit the criteria we literally just discussed 5 seconds ago. I know, but this is the one lone exception on the list, and I made it for the guy that, at least in my lifetime, has the most notorious, or maybe the most infamous draft story. 15 minutes before the 2016 NFL Draft, Laremy Tunsil had a questionable video of him wearing a specialty gas mask released that gave a lot of teams cold feet, and he was pretty much a lock, like top 5, top 10 pick, mocked all over the board. And to be honest, it's almost astonishing as we go on and we look at the rest of these situations and all that, and how some of these other guys fell for these little things, or what exactly they fell for, that this didn't end up being more catastrophic than it was. Only falling to 13th, in my opinion, is extremely, I guess it's just a credit to how good of a fucking player they thought you were, or just that it didn't matter because you passed the intelligence test, which you will hear about repeatedly in this video. But this is more of just a quick honorable mention, but it's also number 10, so we have a top 10 list.
Laramy's short but terrifying free fall would end at 13 when the Miami Dolphins would be the ones to roll the dice.
So Laremy Tunsil, yes sir. Let's get to the ones I actually wrote.
Kick. Jackson bobbles it and now has to try and recover. Deshaun Jackson gets a block. Are you kidding? Deshaun Jackson.
Number 9, Deshaun Jackson. Donnie Avery, Devin Thomas, Jordy Nelson, James Hardy, Eddie Royal, and Jerome Simpson. All 6 of those names, all 6 of those players, came off the board before Deshaun Jackson was taken by the Eagles with the 49th pick. And now, all the time, players are taken before another player that shouldn't be. And, normally, there's a lot of reasons that head into that one. And this one is just kind of unforgivable, which is why Deshaun finds his way onto this list. Jackson had shown in college to be an electric playmaker, both receiving and returning the football, further proving that at the combine, running a 4.35. And then if you look at a couple of mock drafts, an alleged one of Mel Kiper's had him going 17th to the Minnesota Vikings. And I say alleged because more than anybody, ESPN on any other older draft stuff seems to delete it, and I don't know if that's to save anybody's ass or what it is, but there's just really hard to find out there. But unlike ESPN, if we look at Bleacher Report, who seems to keep up most of their articles, we can see that they had him going 18 to Houston, which is just one pick after Kiper. So really, is that alleged mock draft really so wrong? And unfortunately for Jackson's bank account, teams just couldn't get past his size. That is why he slid. He did not slide because he was thought to be a worse player than Donnie Avery, Devin Thomas, Jordy Nelson, James Hardy, Eddie Royal, or Jerome Simpson, I do not believe. From the sounds of it, it just seems as though most teams could not get past Jackson's size. That was it. It didn't matter about the speed, the playmaking, anything on film. He was just too small to take hits, so nobody wanted to take him high and risk having to pay a guy who couldn't stay healthy. And I guess it's understandable, but at the same time, when you look at those 6 names I said, there's probably one that sticks out if you're a casual or younger fan, being Jordy Nelson. And it's not necessarily super excusable for everybody to be drafted over Deshaun just because of his size, especially when you saw the way things played out, as Deshaun turned into being one of, if not the most electrifying player of his time, and created one of the best or most memorable plays in NFL history. Number 8, Myles Jack. Our second entry coming from the 2016 draft, Myles Jack was coming off a meniscus injury that ended his junior year at UCLA just 3 games in. Prior to that, though, his first 2 seasons at UCLA, I can remember Jack blowing up social media at the time. Starting at linebacker and occasionally coming in to play running back, Myles managed to accumulate impressive highlights at both positions that showcased his athleticism. Becoming the offensive and defensive freshman of the year and earning second-team All-Pac-12 defense both years, Jack was already speculated a first-round pick heading into the 2015 season, where he unfortunately suffered said meniscus injury mentioned earlier while participating in a non-contact drill at practice. Afterward, he would withdraw from school to focus on rehab and the upcoming draft. While Myles wasn't ready for the combine, reports still came out that his stock was rising while he was there. Then at his pro day, he posted similar broad jump and vertical numbers to the other linebackers in the class, leading many mock drafts to have him in the top 10 just days before the draft. Jack's fatal mistake, though, was confirming a report that his knee may need follow-up work, resulting in his eventual fall to Jacksonville in the second round with the 32nd pick after being mocked to them in the first by several analysts. Number 7, Will Levis. Okay, so while this one may seem low, just hear me out and watch the rest of the list and you'll understand why Will Levis only comes in here at 7. But Will Levis heading into the draft, according to ESPN Analytics, had a 92% chance to go in the top 10. Instead, what we witnessed was Levis sitting in the green room for the entirety of the first round, with a program repeatedly cutting to him 37 times throughout. Making the situation even worse were the multiple videos of Levis saying he wouldn't show up to the first round if he didn't believe he would go early. One theory reported as to why Levis dropped is over an apparent toe injury that worried some teams. The other widely accepted theory is from some fans and media members alike, involve Levis's love of himself and interest in social media. I mean, look at these videos. Who does this for any other reason than attention, honestly? And to be fair, it worked to earn all the women in his life, which got plenty of screen time thanks to this. Levis's free fall would finally end on day 2, with the Tennessee Titans trading up to take him with the 33rd pick. Number 5, Geno Smith. I'm guessing many of you watching the last entry, especially when I said that Will Levis wasn't as high as you might have predicted, began to wonder where Geno Smith would land, as he is the OG Will Levis. And while not as high as you may think he deserves to be, Geno, excluding one extreme exception, marks a notable shift in this list. As you may have noticed, the first 3 entries all fall prey to free fall because of reasons kind of out of their control. I mean, D-Jack because of his size, Myles for his meniscus, and Levis for his toe. And your only argument could be Levis's personality, but that's just a theory as of now. However, with Geno, the only real thing to point to for his free fall is really just his maturity. I mean, even over time, that take didn't age badly and was kind of confirmed. He was even heavily criticized initially for saying he'd skip day 2 of the draft. At the time, I remember it sounding harsh, but after the flameout in New York and the long road to his eventual career revival 9 years later in Seattle, a lot of the reporting at the time may have been somewhat valid. I mean, just listen to this story from Mark Sanchez.
And I was like, dude, like, you were coming into this facility in like pajamas and slippers and your rookie year with the Jets. And I'm like, dude, he's got like sleep in his eyes. Like, I don't know if this guy loves it.
Geno did end up showing up to day 2 though, with his fall famously ending at the 39th pick to the New York Jets. Number 5, Randy Gregory. The first of 2 gambles made by the Cowboys in the 2015 draft, Randy Gregory was perceived to be a top 10 pick from the start of the process, and despite failing the so-called intelligence test at the combine, having marijuana in his system at the time, many analysts still mocked him in the top 15. It wasn't until after the fall to the 60th pick that reports surfaced that he was tardy and even just unpresent to multiple meetings with teams. Gregory would be suspended a total of 54 games over his tenure with the Cowboys, 14 in 2016, his rookie season, and the entirety of the 17 and 19 seasons. 2 in 2018, and 6 games in 2020. Despite all of that, he was still offered a 5-year, $70 million contract with $28 million guaranteed by the Cowboys during the 2022 offseason. After initially accepting the deal from the Cowboys, he made a surprise move and accepted a contract identical from the Denver Broncos. The difference being Dallas had inserted language to protect themselves from any further hiccups, while the Broncos, in a sense, gave him the signal of faith, not including any such language. Number 4, Justin Houston. The man who had to walk in order for Randy Gregory to run, Justin Houston was suspended 2 games in 2019 while a redshirt sophomore at the University of Georgia for the use of marijuana. So when Houston would go on to fail this so-called intelligence test at the combine, knowing he'd be tested, his stock plummeted, going from what Bleacher Report had as his 9th ranked player in the draft to a 3rd rounder with the 70th pick by the Kansas City Chiefs. And a rant from a team executive at this point shows just how much that one failed test paired with his prior suspension really hurt his pockets. But don't fret for him, he'd earned himself a fat bag just 4 years later, signing a 6-year, $101 million contract with the Chiefs. Number 3, Thurman Thomas. Now, the thing about Thurman Thomas being here is he is the exception I was talking about with Geno earlier, by the way, that didn't do it to himself at all. Actually, it's because of a knee injury in his junior year that he fell in the draft. But the reason that this is so egregious is because Thurman's senior year is arguably, well, not even arguably, statistically his best season. And for that, it's head scratching as to why they let a running back, especially in an era where running backs were just so goddamn valuable, slip. Thurman's draft slide would famously end, of course, at this point, all of these are famous. I don't know why I keep saying that, at 40 to the Buffalo Bills. Number 2, Vontaze Burfict. An article from Matt Miller on November 10th, 2011 compares his personal ranking to that of Mel Kiper's. In the article, Matt ranks Vontaze as his 7th best overall player, disagreeing with Mel, who had him at 15. The Sun Devils, quarterbacked by Nick Foles at the time, had started the season winning 5 of their first 6 games. Unfortunately, after that, they'd go on to just win 1 more game the entirety of the season, with said article coming out just 5 days after a loss to UCLA that would start a 5-game losing streak to end out the season for the Sun Devils. During the last 4 games of the regular season, Vontaze recorded 0 tackles and saw his playing time gradually decrease. They'd end their season with a loss to Boise State in a bowl game that Vontaze barely played in, only recording a single tackle and an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, his 17th and final personal foul of his collegiate career. Despite this, some were still high on the potential they'd seen over his career. And then he had arguably the worst combine in the modern history, running the slowest of any inside linebacker in the class, running a 5.09 and looking out of shape in drills, while also having an all-time blame deflecting press conference, blaming media and coaches for how things had been going and turned out at the end of the year. Oh, and did I mention he failed the intelligence drug test that we've discussed so much already? His pro day was no better, resulting in quite possibly the biggest self-inflicted free fall of all time, going from a first-round lock and possible top 10 pick to undrafted free agent in just 6 months. He'd of course go on to sign with the Bengals, being suspended 22 games and fined $5 million total throughout his career. Number 1, La'el Collins. The person I probably feel the absolute worst for on this list is La'el Collins. La'el was considered a top 15 pick for the 2014 draft before deciding to stay his senior year at LSU. Leading up to the draft, as in just days before the draft, Collins was mocked all over the first round, even going as high as 9th. Unfortunately for Collins, just 2 days before the first round, he was publicly contacted by Baton Rouge police about a woman he may have been romantically involved with being found shot dead in her apartment. Collins had previously been contacted several days earlier, and that's where I say it's kinda his fault and kinda not his fault. I mean, they didn't need to go public with it, but at the same time they wanted his attention. A day before the draft, he attempted to go down and meet with investigators, but was unable to talk with investigators until Monday following the draft. With many teams saying they'd take him off their board until he was cleared, he went from a first-round lock to an undrafted free agent in just a matter of few days. According to an article from Pro Football Talk in 2015, he may never be fully cleared. He was still never named a suspect, and a paternity test for the woman's child, who died a few days later of suspected homicide as well, came back negative. So with an alibi, it effectively ended the whole situation, and in a reported hour-long meeting is all it took. Collins then went on to sign with the Dallas Cowboys that offseason, as he was deemed ineligible for the 2016 draft. This made Collins the second risk the Cowboys took in the 2015 draft, the other being Randy Gregory, who we discussed earlier on this list. And in fairness to the league on this one, it was a murder charge and they had zero information on it, and it was just 2 years after Aaron Hernandez had his entire debacle exposed. So now, having gone through this entire top 10 list, or top 9, whatever. There was 9 guys that I thought for sure definite, and 1 guy that, you know, I just wanted to throw on there. There's probably somebody else. You'll let me know in the comments down below. Could have been on there instead, but I just kind of did that one for the fun of it. But my conclusion or observation is something that maybe some of you guys have noticed a lot more than I have before I looked into it, but I didn't notice it until I looked into it. But a lot of these free falls that I'm noticing, or the bigger ones at least, have seemed to happen really since I'd say about like 2010 or beyond, just because, or maybe you could say really about 2008, around the time that they started covering the combine very heavily. You see, you know, these random drop stories seem to occur more often, and the reason that I believe that that happens is just perception. Now that there's more media and things covering the draft, we have more people who are interested in watching and, you know, actually consuming it. There's more coverage of it, and since there's more coverage of it, there's kind of manipulation of, I guess, stories or things going on in order to, I guess, I don't want to sound like a cliche here, but get clicks. I mean, just think about the 2022 draft where we only had 1 quarterback drafted in the first round, and pretty much the whole way we were talking about how the quarterbacks didn't live up and blah 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 blah. But yet when you looked at the betting lines, I remember it being 2, and I think the over under on how many quarterbacks were going to be drafted in the first round was 2.5, because if you went to ESPN, you would think that there was 6 quarterbacks or 3 quarterbacks in there, especially Malik Willis. You would have thought that he was going to go way higher. Spencer Rattler, you would have thought was going to go way higher because of the way that they covered them, because the thing people want to hear about, especially teams that are bad, which are normally the teams that are tuning into the draft, are about the quarterbacks and how they can try to turn around their team and their franchise with one of those guys. So that's what they try to gravitate towards. And I guess I never noticed just really how heavily the perception affected these free falls until I was really looking at it. But that was my observation or conclusion. Let me know if you came to the same one, or if that's extremely obvious and I'm just arriving to the party super late. But with that said, thank you and peace.